Hello and welcome back to SimonsRants, and Happy New Year. It's been another long year of great movies. I know every year people want to say they don't make good movies anymore, and I know sometimes it feels like that, but honestly, every year there's always great movies to be found, and every year I struggle to make a top 10 list, and yeah, you already saw the title, this ain't no top 10 list. I wanted to make a top 24 best movies of 2024 list because maybe it's just a little convenient that it's the year 2024, at least it was, but there was definitely more than 10 that I wanted to talk about. 24 is pushing it a little bit, but just, it would be fun, I thought, to talk about 24 for the year. But yeah, same old. I haven't seen every movie to come out this year, so sorry if my list doesn't have your favorite movie from the year on it. There was definitely some movies I tried to get to and just didn't have enough time. Also, yeah, maybe we just disagree. That's kind of the name of the game. It's all opinions, and there's no real objective truths about art. This is all just for fun anyway. So these are my favorite movies from 2024, but of course, what are yours? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm sure our lists are going to be different. So, without further ado, let's get into my favorite movies of the year. But before we do the top 24, I just want to give a quick shout out to another 5 honorable mentions that I had. So, in alphabetical order, there is Here, Heretic, Megalopolis, Red One, and Tuesday. And just to sum up my thoughts on all 5 real quick, because I don't want to give them too much attention, because they're just honorable mentions, I didn't think any of these movies were great, but I thought that they were all either interesting or bold or brave for choices they made. I've done first thoughts on all of these already, but, you know, Here, Heretic, Megalopolis, and Tuesday, I feel the same about all of those, where it's like a really good idea that just wasn't fully fleshed out, like a really good moment or two in an overall mediocre to bad movie, but I just love those moments. And then Red One, it was just a fun movie, you know, a fun Christmas movie. It wasn't good enough to make the list, but I still wanted to give it a shout out because it's the most fun I've had seeing a Christmas movie in theaters in a long while. I can't remember the last fun Christmas movie that was in theaters, so yeah, just wanted to give those 5 a quick shout out, and then we can move on to the list. So, number 24. Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Now, yes, I am aware this movie's not particularly good. I know that. I know. But I had so much fun with it, and I mentioned in the first thoughts already, but, like, there's a nostalgic feel to the movie where, one, you know, obviously the Sonic and Knuckles and Shadow, all those characters are very nostalgic for me, growing up with those TV shows, Sonic X, and then there's the video games and stuff, too. But also just for me, being a huge Jim Carrey fan, seeing him on screen, being just ridiculously funny again for the first time in a long time. So, is it the best movie in the world? No, but I wanted to put it on this list because it was one of the most enjoyable movies of the year for me, because I laughed harder at that than I had at anything in a long time, so I really enjoyed that movie. Is it pretty dumb? Yeah, but it's a kid's movie, it's a family movie, and it was a lot of fun. Number 23, Problemista. Problemista I reviewed back at the beginning of the year. It was something that I had really high expectations for that weren't fully met, but it was still a very entertaining idea and entertaining visuals. I think it didn't all come together, and I think I mentioned back in my review of it that I'm very curious to see what this director does next, because clearly he's got some good ideas. He just kind of needs to get a little more experience under his belt, but still, all that being said, the movie is still good. It could have been great, I think, but it was still good with, once again, interesting visuals. It kind of taps into a lot of the things we see nowadays in the indie artsy movie crowd. I believe A24 distributed it and produced it, maybe, and it definitely has that indie artsy vibe. I saw it in an indie artsy theater, and so it was really trying to attract that kind of audience, and it did an okay job at it. I think it was quirky and different enough, and had a unique enough message and story to it that even though there were parts of it that felt repetitive and parts of it that felt like it was borrowed from better movies, ultimately it still felt like its own original unique thing. So once again, we're at the bottom of the list here, so these movies aren't great, but there's things about them I enjoy, and I certainly enjoyed the style of this, and like I said, it's just really interesting to see where this director will go from here. So I did enjoy it. Not one of the absolute best movies of the year, but still pretty good. Number 22, Alien Romulus. So, Alien Romulus, still we're in that same kind of category where the whole movie isn't great, but there was certainly great moments in there. And I love the original Alien for the atmosphere the movie brings. And I hadn't felt that atmosphere in a lot of the sequels that I had seen either all the way through or clips of. And sure, there's moments in this movie that don't hold up as far as like the atmosphere and the cheesiness and everything starts to creep in, you know, floating down a hallway, shooting lasers and stuff, and also the obvious the obvious member berries that were put in it. It's frustrating, sure, but the moments that nailed it really nailed it, and it felt like took big inspiration from the video game as well, which was great idea to do that. But having that scene, you know, with the face huggers in the hallway and changing the temperature in the room, it was just, that was inspired. The whole movie could have sucked outside that moment, and I still would have had fond feelings toward the movie just because of that scene. But luckily, there's other really good moments throughout the movie too, especially the ending, which I talked about. And when I first saw it, I failed to realize that that idea had already been done before in Alien Resurrection, I believe. But even after finding out and having that initial disappointment of, oh, it wasn't a unique and creative idea, I still feel like the idea was executed better in this than it had been done before. And so I can still say that's the best twist ending or the best ending I've seen in any Alien sequel in my mind. Number 21, Longlegs. Longlegs is an interesting one because it's atmospheric, it's creepy, it's really brooding, and I love the artistic way that they just slowly drag you into this hellscape, and then also go completely absurd and have Nicolas Cage at his both best and worst acting. And I just, you know, part of me wishes they had cast literally anybody else in that role, because I think this movie could have been amazing if it was a legitimately good actor working in that role, because Nicolas Cage in this role at times is that amazing Oscar-worthy performance actor, and then other times it completely devalues the rest of the movie with how silly and cheesy it gets, and that is frustrating. But you can say this movie is great at times and bad at times, but it's always entertaining. Could it have been a lot better if not for some weird choices, especially near the end of the movie? Probably, but I still enjoyed the movie throughout, even if there's parts where it's like rolling my eyes a little bit. So yeah, I mean, we definitely got some of the best memes of the year because of this movie, but we also got some genuinely cool and creepy moments because of this movie. And now that I've been introduced to the director, Oz Perkins, I am very curious to see what he will do in the future, because I think, one, removing Nicolas Cage from future projects should help, and also, two, I think having more experience is always a good thing, so I'm curious to see what he will do now that he's got this, at least first movie that I've heard of under his belt. I'm sure he's been working for a while, but this was like the first mainstream success he had, so now that he's had that, and is assumedly, I'm guessing, getting more attention and more money from studios to make something a little bit bigger and better in theory. So yeah, once again, not a perfect movie, but a very enjoyable and entertaining movie, even for all its flaws. Number 20, Civil War. Civil War, I've definitely debated with people about this movie this year, because a lot of people were disappointed by it, and I still think that's in large part due to poor marketing of the film, because the film was definitely marketed leading up to the election like it was gonna be like pitting, Republicans versus Democrats kind of thing. And this movie wasn't about that. It was about the psychological impact of war on people, in this case specifically journalists and photographers, war photographers. And that's not at all what people were expecting from this movie, so a lot of people ended up hating this movie because of that. And I was certainly disappointed that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but I still enjoyed what it was. I think Alex Garland is a very, very skilled director. His writing is a little bit all over the place. I think sometimes he's really profound and other times he is not at all and thinks he is. So Civil War definitely had a couple of hiccups along the way, but it had great acting performances, even if the whole movie was stolen away by Jesse Plemons' little bit part cameo. But the rest of the cast, especially Kaylee Spaney, I've talked a million times on this channel about her already. I loved her in this movie, but Kirsten Dunst as well was also very good. And I just, overall, the visuals of this movie mixed with the messaging of this movie, I just thought was for a very powerful story. So even though, once again, and I keep saying it about these early ones, they're not perfect movies, they're very good and impacted me in a way. So I think if there's an impact the movie leaves on you, then it was worth making and certainly worth watching. Number 19, Cuckoo. Cuckoo, if you watch my first thoughts, you definitely get the impression I was very disappointed with this movie, but as the first thoughts went on, I liked it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more as it kept going, and this is one of those movies that definitely sticks with you. The idea of it does, and I'm a sucker for that. So even though I certainly would have made different choices and decisions than the writer and director did, it doesn't mean I still didn't really respect this movie for what it was doing. Totally still think there are flaws with it, and it's a little imbalanced, but there are moments of pure brilliance in this movie. Like, certain shots of horror were some of the best I've ever seen in my life. I talked about it in my review, where that shot on the bike with the woman running up, reaching is one of the coolest shots I've ever seen in a horror movie, and that moment alone made me want to see this movie. I was like, I don't know who any of these people are involved. I'd never heard of Hunter Schafer before this movie, so I went in going like, oh, this is fun, she's some unknown actress, good for her getting this role, and I find out after I record and upload my review that she is quite popular, very famous. Missed out on that because I don't watch that TV show that will remain nameless. But no, she's phenomenal in this movie. She quickly became one of my favorite rising stars. It's funny how many great actors were in that show, even though the show seems to be kind of gross, but we're neither here nor there on that. But anyway, all around great performances in this movie, so and great visuals and a very unique take on a horror subject that I hadn't seen anything like this. So even though that third act kind of fell apart for me, it's still, the ideas are something that's going to sit with me forever, and that is what you really want from great storytelling, as well as, especially in this case, great horror, where you want those visuals, you want those themes stuck in your head, and this certainly did that for me. Now, once again, not perfect, but we're getting closer. Number 18, Sasquatch Sunset. One thing I value pretty much above anything else when, making these lists and reviewing movies is originality. Sometimes more than probably some of you would prefer, because Sasquatch Sunset is, a lot of people hate this movie, and I completely understand why. And if every single one of you viewers say, what is wrong with you, this movie sucked, I would completely understand where you're coming from. But this was one of the most unique and interesting and profound experiences for me this year, where even though I was like, this movie is really weird, really bizarre, and I don't want to say it's bad or anything, but I don't want to say it's great either. Whatever it is, I loved it. Because for those of you who don't know what it is, it's about a group of Sasquatches living their everyday life, and they don't speak English, they barely, grunt and speak at all, and they go through this just weird story. And it's for some reason endearing in a way. Like, it is hilarious at times, it's poignant at times, it is all over the place. It's just one of those stories, though, that it's like, if this particular guy didn't make this movie, nobody else would have. It is purely the vision of this creator. And it's like, you don't get the idea at all that a studio stepped in to polish up this story or make it more palatable to a wider audience. You don't get that at all. And I'm so glad, because, yeah, okay, studios know what they're talking about a lot of the time. Unless you're a great auteur like Scorsese or Tarantino or one of those guys, you need the notes from studios a lot of the time. Not all the time. Sometimes the studios are dead wrong, but they know what they're doing when it comes to marketing and appealing to wide varieties of people. So when you get something that just feels completely unfiltered, yeah, there's some graininess that comes along with the movie. It feels a little rough around the edges. And I love that feeling, because I'm like, ooh, look, an artist made something. It's like when you see an oil painting, you see the brush strokes in there. And it's like, oh, see, it's imperfect. You can tell it's a painting. I want to tell it's a painting. All that weird artistic analogy to say, when I see something this unique and this profound in a way, it doesn't matter how weird or bizarre or strange or off-putting it can be. I love and I embrace the weird and bizarre. And to me, this was pushing boundaries for me. It got just as far as I can go in the weird and bizarre, but I love the experience, and I wouldn't have traded for anything. I thought it was a great movie. But maybe a little too weird at times. Number 17. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I know it's a really big thing, and I'm guilty of doing this as well, where people, when they talk about movies nowadays, you just automatically revert to CGI bad, practical effects good. And I understand why. CGI right now is being rushed, and, the artists aren't being paid enough, and it's just, they're churning out this product that looks terrible, and oftentimes it's replacing practical effects that would have been easily accessible and quicker to do, frankly, but either one, they were lazy, or two, it was cheaper, and so they use this shitty looking CGI model. This is not that case. This is a case where a group of filmmakers and a studio get together, completely impassioned to make something that looks amazing with computer generated effects, and it does. It just looks really good. It's some of the best visual effects of the year. And once again, the Planet of the Apes franchise is not just pretty pictures. It this whole time has been remarkably good stories with really good acting too. And I was nervous going into this because of the first one that Andy Serkis wasn't heavily involved in. And I love Andy Serkis, and I felt like he was kind of the heart and soul of this franchise. So I went in a little bit nervous, thinking this looks like a good plot, and I'm excited for more within this universe, but where is it gonna go? Like, can they keep making this good? And the answer was definitely, absolutely they did. This was one of my favorite Planet of the Apes movies I've ever seen. I think a lot of people were disappointed by the ending of the movie, and I get that, because it's kind of like ham-fisting a forced sequel to come in the future, and that was the weakest part of the movie to me. But overall, from brilliant effects like I mentioned, and a great story up until that point, and absolutely brilliant acting. I thought the acting across the board, but especially from Kevin Durand, not the basketball player, Durand. Peter Macon was also great in this movie too. So those two guys especially, I loved them in this movie, and thought that they were able to completely, without really much of a hitch, carry on that torch that Andy Serkis had been sprinting with for the past 3 movies. And I really don't feel like they missed a beat at all. And I know that there was really talented people involved in the other ones. Like I said, Andy Serkis, but also the director, same guy that did the Batman. Like, everybody loved those people, and now we're missing all of them. Is it still going to be good? And it was. So I was extremely impressed by it. Sure, it's a dumb action movie at times, I get it. Sometimes it goes a little bit fast and furious, but overall, it's still a really good movie with great performances and, like I said, awesome visual effects. Number 16, Dune Part 2. Now, yes, this is another one of those movies that, like, if you watch my first thoughts, you might not get that I thought this movie was good, because I'm extremely critical of it. But that's what I do when, like, I see something that has the potential to be perfect and better than anything we've seen before, because, as I said, like, when I watched the opening scene of this movie, I was like, this is the closest I'm going to get to seeing Lord of the Rings in theaters for the first time, or something like that. I was like, this is one of those moments where you're like, I wish I could see this in theaters again for the first time. And yes, I stand by my criticism of the movie. I don't think some of the casting is great. I think some of the acting is poor. And I think some of the pacing and some of the storytelling decisions in it also aren't great, but overall it is a spectacle of a movie. Not perfect, but a spectacle. And once again, like, that's where you get into seeing auteurs doing their auteurs things, you know? And Denis Villeneuve is one of the best directors alive right now. We're so lucky that he is making such an epic story on such a grand scale. There's very few directors that both can pull off art house and blockbuster, so having those directors choose to do blockbusters and show the common people what a good director can do, it's astounding. And so even though I don't love the movie as much as I think most people would say they do, and, you know, it didn't even make my top 15, and I think a lot of people are going to be really mad about that, frankly, and just being honest, I know. I still really respect the hell out of this movie. So even though I don't believe it was, like, necessarily for me personally, I still respect it, and I still see the amazing artistic ability that went into it, especially, once again, mentioned it in the last thing, the visual effects are definitely the best I've seen this year. I mean, alone, that opening scene, like I just mentioned, them flying around in the desert, it just looks so good. Like, it looks real, and it looks amazing, and it looks like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know how to describe the feeling that I felt when I saw that opening scene. And yes, I know I'm harping on one moment rather than the whole thing, but once again, it is those moments in these movies that, like, you're never gonna really get a fully amazing or a perfect movie. That's very rare to get, like, a movie that, like, from start to finish, you're like, this whole thing's great. And so that's where we are on this list still, is, like, finding the movies that had the moments that just left you with your jaw open. And so the whole movie wasn't great for me, but there were moments of pure brilliance and pure bliss. And I did, you know, complain about the cast a little bit, but that's not to say all the acting is bad either. You know, I thought Javier Bardem was phenomenal in this movie. I think he's always good, but this was one of his better performances. Stellan Skarsgård, same thing. He's always good, but in this, I thought and same thing with the first one, I think that he's just been great this whole time. So it's not personally my favorite or anything, but I can see the brilliance that went into it. And this list, you know, as a critic, I'm always trying to teeter between, you know, giving my subjective opinion and looking at the objective truths about the movie. I know I'm contradicting myself there, because I think all art is subjective. You can't really find objectivity in art, but I still feel like there kind of is. Like, sometimes you just see something, and even if you're like, that's not for me, I know it's good though, you know, and that's what, like seeing, like, a really pretty person, but knowing that's not my type, but objectively that is a very attractive person. Brad Pitt, he ain't my type. He's a hot dude, though, I know that. And so that's how I felt watching this movie. I was like, that's a lot like Brad Pitt. Number 15, Terrifier 3. Oh, yeah, and this where the subjectivity comes back, where, okay, is this movie objectively great? I think a lot of people would say no, but I ask you, what makes a movie great? And I think the answer is succeeding at what it set out to do. And this movie, even more so than its previous two films in the series so far, set out to absolutely horrify and disgust its audience with both a grotesque visual style, as well as overall feeling and, you know, plot from these characters being so demonic and disgusting, and then what they do being even grosser than that. And the visuals, oh god, the visuals in this movie were enough to, you know, make you queasy, which, like, I know people say that about every horror movie that comes out. They said it about, like, Longlegs of all movies. But, like, you know, every time a new horror movie comes out, it's like, it's the most horrifying thing you've ever seen. And then you watch it, like, was there a scary moment in there? I didn't see anything. But this was one of the movies that's, like, it genuinely was not overdone or exaggerated at all, when it's like people were throwing up watching this movie or had to leave the theater, they were queasy, and I'm like, I believe you. I do. Because I didn't get up and leave, I didn't throw up or any of that, but I could have, like, I could understand if somebody did, and I saw several people get up and leave from this movie in it. I know, people argue that the Terrifier movies aren't good movies because there's no plot, it's just gore for the sake of it, it's not really horror, and I disagree. I understand why people say that. I, have had debates with people about that. What I will say in defense of that is, I think, one, the plot is, deeper than it appears on the surface because of the lore. I've frankly thought about doing a video on the lore behind Terrifier. But two, I think the plot, it's a bit cheesy, it's a bit silly, but there is stuff going on there. There's layers that get deeper in each movie. And they reference that in the 7 layers of hell and everything. But on top of all of that, it's brought to the screen, to me, one of the most iconic horror villains we've had since the 90s, if not the most. Like, we don't really get iconic horror movie villains like that anymore. I mean, like, back in the day, we had Ghostface, and we had Jason, Freddy, and, like, all of these different, like, really iconic people, Chucky. They're all just first names for some reason. And now we have Art the Clown. Is he as iconic as Jason? No, I don't think he's there yet, but he's up there with, like, Pennywise to me now, where, like, he's up and coming, and if they can keep making these movies with bigger and bigger budgets and keep outdoing themselves with this grotesque stuff, I don't know where they go from here, because, like, if you asked me, who has written scripts to write something like this, I don't know that I could write 1, let alone 3. Like, my brain doesn't work like that. So I kind of really respect them for what they're able to do and what they're able to capture, because, oh my god, it's haunting. It really is. It's just, like, those visuals stick with you, and that's something that, it's just, to me, it's impressive. Also, to then turn around and make the movies as enjoyable as they are despite all that, because I'm not a big gore guy. That's not something appealing to me. What's appealing to me and makes me keep coming back is Art. The clown himself is such a fun character that you almost want to root for him, or at least I did before this movie. Not that the effects are so gross it's getting harder to root for him, but, like, the fact that I want to at all just shows how great this character is written to me. Once again, I understand this is very subjective, and a lot of people will be absolutely appalled by me putting on this list, especially ahead of Dune, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. Number 14, Deadpool and Wolverine. So it's ironic that I can still really enjoy this movie, because I was on the whole I'm over Ryan Reynolds bandwagon. Like, I was in the front seat. I'd been in there for a while. First one on that bandwagon. Didn't enjoy Deadpool 2. Hadn't really enjoyed him in anything since probably Deadpool 1. And it was just like, I'm over the shtick. Don't care for it. Wake me when it's over. And then, obviously, you add in Wolverine, played by Hugh Jackman. I'm like, alright, fine, I have to be interested, I am. And then, sure enough, it was one of the funniest movies of the year. And they completely won me back over. Like, I mean, the first Deadpool didn't even honestly really impress me that much, because, one of the things leading up to the first Deadpool movie was the video game. The Deadpool video game was gaining a lot of steam and a lot of attention. So I saw multiple people do playthroughs of that, and it really raised my expectations and the bar in my mind for what Deadpool could be. And then the movie came out and it was a pretty standard superhero movie. Yeah, there was breaking the fourth wall and some jokes, but it didn't really do enough to really at least get my attention. I was just like, that was fine. Can't wait to see what they do in the next one when they really push the limits. And then the second one was a bore fest to me. I didn't get into it at all, didn't find it funny, wasn't interested. So when I first saw that they were making this one, I was excited, and I hated that I was excited, because I'm like, it's not going to live up to expectations, it's not going to be good. And then it was the best of the 3 to me by far. Is the story worse than the other 2? Absolutely. The story is pretty bad. It's as boring as any MCU movie has been recently. The stories are trash. But it didn't matter. It was about Deadpool, and it was about Wolverine, and about their interactions, and about the humor that came with that, as well as all the other cameos and stuff. And it was laugh out loud funny the entire runtime. Yeah, it's dumb. Yeah, the effects had some issues that they needed to fix later after they put it out in theaters. Yeah, there's issues as far as storytelling and even just basic script writing. Sure, I get that, but it's entertaining. And it's a lot like how I was talking about Sonic earlier, where it's like, you just want to be entertained, and sometimes you just feel like a little bit like a kid again. You get nostalgic feelings, and you feel like a kid again. And that's how this movie made me feel too, you know? And even more so, because it's like, one of the biggest things I was worried about was the desecration of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. We already had the perfect ending, and a lot of people didn't want another Wolverine movie with Hugh Jackman in it, because you can't do that, you know? Like, and it's different with, like, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, because we never saw an end to that. And it's different with Patrick Stewart's Xavier, because he's died a million times, so, like, you're used to it at this point. But with Hugh Jackman, like, his character died after having, you know, the perfect send-off. How is bringing him back not going to spit in the face of that? And they somehow, despite having, like I said, a pretty bad script, saved the best parts of their writing ability for that, and that explanation, and turned that moment into not only not spitting in the face, but an actual heartfelt homage to what Wolverine was and what he is now. And so, yeah, I mean, not only is the movie hilarious the whole time, but it has a couple of moments that actually earn your respect too, and tug at your heartstrings a little bit. So overall, just a lot of fun. Number 13, Nosferatu. Yeah, I mean, you can't leave Robert Eggers off of these lists, even when there's a million fart jokes, and there weren't any. Thank God there were no fart jokes. But yeah, no, Robert Eggers knows how to make a good-looking movie. So even if you disagree with some of his choices, like fart jokes, you always come away from his movies very impressed, like from a technical standpoint. And so even though The Northman wasn't, you know, my favorite, I don't think it made the top 10 list of whatever year that was, I kind of knew that, like, that was a one-off mistake. And it's still not a terrible movie. It's not even really bad. But I just knew when, like, you're making Nosferatu with one of the coolest looking directors, not him, his movies. He looks pretty cool, I guess. But, like, one of the most visually appealing directors, once again, his movies. And it's just like, how can this not be a match made in heaven? And then you hear the cast involved, and you just keep getting more and more excited. Like, Bill Skarsgård is a genius. I think that whole family is extremely talented, and he's somehow seemingly the most talented one of the bunch. But then, you know, you throw in Lily Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult and Willem Dafoe, and you just, like, this movie's packed with talent. And yeah, it's oozing out the charisma, the creepiness, the ambiance of this movie. So even though, once again, I don't think the movie's perfect, I, you know, nitpicked the story a lot in my review of that. And part of that, you know, it's just the problem of remaking a classic, remaking one of the best movies of all time. The original Nosferatu is a great original horror movie that it's just impossible to recapture. Yes, if you watch it now, it's really silly. It came out over 100 years ago, dude. Like, you can't really compare, but, like, you just kind of take yourself back in time and, like, imagine seeing that for the first time versus seeing this for the first time. And it's like, yeah, it's gonna make it harder to think this movie's great. But this movie, when it's done, you genuinely feel like it is. And you genuinely feel like it paid all respects and, like, lived up to the first one in every way, which is so hard to do. Like, that's why you don't see remakes of things like Citizen Kane or It's a Wonderful Life or other great classic movies. It's ironic I just said those two posters back there. I didn't even mean to do that. But, like, you don't see remakes of those movies because no matter how good the remake is, it's always going to be in the shadow of the predecessor. Unless somehow you make it better, which is so rare. But they got pretty damn close. And they got so close that I think a lot of people will say it is better. I disagree, but I'd understand why they would say that. Because you know, from the way that they just shoot the scenes with the lighting, the camera work, the visual style of it, the ambiance, literally the sound of this movie with the scoring mixed with the sounds. Like, they literally, the castle is just, the sound of the castle is Orlok's breathing, which is just freaking ridiculous and crazy. And then also just the way that they go, like, Robert Eggers goes out of his way to make movies historically accurate and, like, refuses to use electricity for his lighting and stuff, and, like, makes Bill Skarsgård's Nosferatu look nothing like anybody expected, but how he should actually look. And you respect the hell out of this movie, where it's kind of like the same thing with Dune, where it's like, even if it's not your cup of tea, you have to respect it. But the thing is, I'm not a big tea drinker, but I'll dabble in this tea. That's a pretty good tea. Number 12, Spaceman. Yeah, okay. The movie's got bad reviews. I know that. But I don't know. It was something for me. Like, I said in the review of it, I was just like, I feel like you slap A24 on this, you put it in theaters, this movie's getting talked about, man. I don't know. I feel like it just hit the wrong audience, because I love this movie. Are there flaws with it? Hell yes. The script, the dialogue, awful. It genuinely is awful. And not all of the acting is great either, but, like, I didn't need it to be. The idea, the concept was so wonderful. I loved the philosophy of this movie, the way the characters interacted. You know, Paul Dano and Adam Sandler were great together in their weird, quirky little interactions, and I just loved what this movie did to me on, like, an emotional level. And it obviously, it's trying to make you think. I hate that it was, by the way, marketed as a sci-fi. It's not. Just because you're in space doesn't make it sci-fi. It's bogus that they do that. It is a drama, maybe fantasy drama, and I loved how it affected me on an emotional level, you know, and it made me think about my life, and it made me think about, like, it really nailed everything it was trying to do on a powerful level. And, like, if you can just get over the flaws with it, which, you know, there's noticeable ones. I'm not saying that this movie is objectively, this is where the objectivity and the subjectivity come in. Like, this is a worse made movie than Nosferatu or Dune, and I get that. But to me, this movie impacted me more than those did, because I felt like it was saying something that was a little more profound, you know. And I'm not knocking any other movie on this list or anything by saying that. It's just like, to me, this movie just hit me on a personal level, and I love that. I love movies that really make you feel something or really make you think something, because yes, there's a million movies that can be technically perfect, but what's the point of art if it doesn't make you feel or make you think? And this movie did both for me, and, you know, that's something that I really love, and that's why I love movies. I love movies because they can change people's lives. And I'm not trying to say, I don't want to blow this movie out of proportion, because there are movies that have genuinely changed how I view life on a daily basis, and this didn't do that for me, but it still impacted me. And you know, I don't know. It's hard to talk about movies like this because it is just such a personal thing. So either you get it or you don't. And for me, I certainly got this movie, and I don't know that all of you will, but I can't recommend it enough because it's an experience worth going on, especially if you can relate to the feeling of loneliness, because this movie is so deeply seeped in loneliness. That's like the crux of this, because, you know, it's an astronaut stuck in space by himself, and this movie really tackles what it's like to be alone and to discover oneself while in the midst of discovering the world around them. And this movie, for some reason, nobody seems to like it. I think more people should. I really do. I really do. Number 11, Blink Twice. Blink Twice, oh man, to me, it's everything that, like, I felt like people were trying to tell me Knives Out was, where it's just like a brilliant mystery mixed with social commentary, brilliant acting and directing, great camera work, and surprise fun appearances by actors you hadn't seen in forever. And I just love this movie on, once again, a personal level. And once again, I felt like it just didn't get the recognition it deserved, because I was like, everything about this movie just is great for me. And once again, there was a couple of flaws in the presentation, I suppose. Some pacing stuff, some rookie mistakes from a rookie director. I get that. But, like, I don't know. I just, genuinely, until recently, thought this was going to be a shoo-in for the top 10 and probably my top 5, and it just recently got bumped out. And it's just a genuinely great movie that I feel like got slept on by most people this year. Like, I described it before as, like, it's Barbie. You know, it's the same thing as Barbie. This movie was Barbie 2. It is the same plot as Barbie, just told in a thriller format and slightly less funny. But it's still funny. It's still got great social commentary. It's still got a fantastic cast. And, like, Barbie was on everybody's top 10 list that it wasn't... How do I say this? Ben Shapiro. And I don't know. I just feel like this deserves that same recognition and hasn't gotten that. It's got a 6.5 and a 66%. Why isn't this getting Oscar buzz? I feel like it deserved it just as much as Barbie did. I don't know. I don't get it. To me, this is one of those things where I'm like, it's not even subjectivity. I just feel like this is objectively good and people aren't reacting like it is, and I don't get it. Like, I feel like I genuinely am missing something. Or maybe everybody else is. I don't know. Who's the dumb one? Is it me? Couldn't be. It must be everybody else. I don't know. It was just generally one of my favorite movies of the year. From the second I saw it, I was telling so many people about it. I told everybody I knew that liked movies to go see it. And I feel like everybody I told to see it, that saw it, came back saying, yeah, that was really good. And I just, like, don't know what the disconnect was with the everyman audience and even the critics too. I don't know. Don't know what happened there. Alright, now we are finally into the top 10 movies. So if you skipped ahead, welcome. This is the final top 10 movies of 2024. And we're starting off with a bang. Number 10, Wicked, which, once again, weird thing. I'm glad that, like, you look on IMDb, it's got a 7.9 and it's got a 73% on Metacritic. So people and critics both like this movie. So I feel a little bit less insane than I do when I'm on Twitter, because film Twitter will have you believe that this movie sucked. They were saying it was bad before it even came out, and I went into the showing of this movie ready for a hate watch. And then from the first 30 seconds, I went, wait, is this movie good? And it just was good the whole time. One of the best movies of the year, top 10. And, like, it's not just, like, great music, which it is. It's great, you know, written music and choreographed and everything, but it's also, like, really talented people doing it. Ariana Grande is extremely talented. Sorry, I didn't really know that before this. Cynthia Erivo was amazing as Elphaba. Yes, I know I called her Elphaba in my first thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm new to this. Just an amazingly talented cast, and also Jeff Goldblum. You have to be excited when he's in a movie. And then I don't even get why people complain so much about the visuals. Is it not as saturated as you wanted it to be? I guess. I didn't notice. I didn't care. Were there some auto-tuning on the singing? Yeah, it's a Hollywood musical. They're going to auto-tune it. That's what they always do. I don't know. The complaints people had about this movie didn't make any sense to me. I thought it was great. I enjoyed it the whole time. I laughed. I cried. It just was a great emotional experience that, you know, turned me into a musical fan. I'm not saying that, like, oh, I've never enjoyed a musical before, but I am not, my default setting isn't I love musicals. It's when I see a really good musical that I go, oh, I love this. You know, I had that when The Greatest Showman came out, and I was like, oh man, this musical is awesome. And I just listened to the soundtrack over and over and over and over again for a month. And that's what happened with this, where I just was like, I need to listen to Cynthia Erivo just blow my mind again. And I would just listen to her songs on repeat. And it's like, you know, that's how you know a movie's good or a musical's good, is when you just can't get enough of the music. And I had said in my first thought that I was like, I wasn't really into the general filler songs, if you will, and I still kind of stand by that, but the big ones, you know, the really big ones, like the Defying Gravity and Popular, like, those songs, they're bops. They're really good. And, you know, I don't know. The issues most people had with this movie just didn't bother me. My only complaint is they cast people that couldn't sing in certain roles, and I don't know why they did that. It's a musical. cast people who can sing, like, I don't know. But yeah, overall, just a really fun time. And if you're not typically into musicals, I think this movie will make you enjoy it anyway. Number 9, Late Night with the Devil. I was so excited to see David Dastmalchian be the lead role in a movie finally, because he's been one of my favorite character background actors for years, and now he's finally starring in his own movie, and thank God, it was great. It was a lot of fun. I talked about it back when it came out as being one of the most unique and original horror movies I'd ever seen. There's a lot of really fun practical effects in the movie. My one knock on the movie being that it wasn't particularly scary, which is something you want a horror movie to be. You want, obviously, it to be horrifying, and it doesn't really nail that part, but the storytelling is so good, the acting is great, and it's so unique and different than anything else I'd ever seen that even though it wasn't nail-biting or nerve-wracking, it was just trying to live on the merit alone of its story, it works perfectly. And so I love this movie, because even though the horror bits didn't really do anything for me, I was so invested in what was going to happen next that it was almost like I was being thrilled by it, because I was waiting on the edge of my seat in anticipation just to see what's going to happen next and where the story is going to go and what cool thing are they going to do next with the fun practical effects and the weird quirky style of everything. I loved how it was shot on like multicam while they're doing this behind the scenes stuff, and it's also made to look like a TV show, and then you've got some weird spoiler kind of stuff going on, and you're like, what's this about? And then the ending just leaves you reeling like, what just happened? Oh my god, I loved this movie. It was so unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and like I said earlier, if you didn't skip that part, I love originality. Originality is such an amazing thing in art because it's so rare. Not because we've ran out of stories to tell, but because we know what stories work, and so we don't bother telling any other ones because we just want to make money. We want to be successful. We want to be liked. It's hard to come up with something new, and it's also scary to come up with something new because maybe people won't like it. Who knows? Well, they did, and they made something new that was absolutely great, and I loved this movie. So, yeah, can't recommend it enough. Even if you're not a huge fan of horror, I think this one is a good one for you to start on because it won't scare you too much, but it will definitely intrigue you. Number 8, Sing Sing. For the longest time, this was in my top 3. I actually just recently moved it down when, finalizing my list for this video. And I hated to do it because I loved everything about this movie. I just kind of wanted more. And I feel like if the movie left me wanting more, then I can't really make it a top 3 movie. But everything I got about it, I loved. From Coleman Domingo's performance, where if he doesn't get at least nominated for this movie, there's something wrong with the Oscars and Golden Globes or whoever. I think he's got a good shot at winning. I certainly hope he does win. Like, there's 2 people that deserve to win Best Actor, I think, and he's one of them. So if he doesn't win it, or at least get nominated, that's just a big mistake to me. But also, along with that, having the vast majority of the prisoners in this movie be played by their real-life counterparts was just such a brilliant decision. Because it's like, hey, we're making a movie about actors. Why not have them play themselves? They're actors. They've got some talent, right? And some of them were really, really good, especially Clarence Macklin. He was phenomenal, and I think also deserves an Oscar nod for this. So, yeah, I wish that whoever was put in charge, the director or writer or whatever, was willing to get a little bit, dirtier, a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of things. But still, I think this movie was brilliantly made as far as, what we did get was just so well done. It was the first movie I remember seeing this year that I was like, okay, now this is an Oscar contender. Like, I'd seen some great movies, but there's a different vibe that you don't always get from great movies that you just feel in an Oscar movie, where it's like, okay, this feels like it should win an award. And I don't mean something like Dune, where it's like, obviously, okay, that's going to be nominated for stuff. Or, like Barbie got nominated for stuff. I'm talking there's just certain feel to an Oscar movie, where you're like, okay, this feels like something people are going to be studying later. And that's what I felt in Sing Sing. Even though, like I said, it had some flaws to it, from the acting performances to the camera work and just the score, the music in this movie was great, and just all of these feelings that it evokes in you, even if it's something you have no prior experience with or can relate to. Like, I don't relate to anything really in this movie, from being in prison to the daily struggles that these guys are going through. I don't relate to any of that, but like, it made me feel like a part of it. And that's how the storytelling is great. And then, of course, like I said, Coleman Domingo is just a brilliant actor, and seeing him in this is just, if he doesn't get nominated, we need to riot. Where? I don't know, but we'll riot somewhere. Hollywood, maybe. I don't know. We'll talk about it later. Number 7. Hundreds of Beavers. Hundreds of Beavers is not a movie that we will be studying later, but we will enjoy watching it right now, because in case you don't know what it is, you missed it. I did just talk about it in a video. This is not a mainstream movie. It was made for $150,000 by some dudes named Ryland Brixton Cole Twos, and Mike Cheslick, and these guys are awesome because they made this parody homage to 1920s, 10s silent film comedies and mixed that with like modern humor, from what felt like a Nickelodeon show to like College Humor to a million different things, and for some reason made a pseudo-silent film. It's not literally silent, but they treat it like it's one, and they somehow dragged that out into practically 2 hours where it's non-stop laughter the entire time. I don't know how they did that, because I think the average person could make a funny movie like this for about 15 minutes. I mean, even Mel Brooks, debatably the greatest comedic director of all time, made silent film, and to me that was funny for about 15 minutes. I got over the joke pretty quickly. These guys made it work for practically 2 hours, and it was by far, to me, the funniest movie this year. It's not even close. And like, I know there weren't a lot of great comedies this year. The only really other comedy that I liked this year was Deadpool. But still, even so, that is a Disney movie with Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman and other great A-list actors, and Hundreds of Beavers is so much funnier. So much funnier. And just a brilliant concept that, like I said, I don't know how you do this. I legitimately don't know. Like, sometimes, I can watch a movie, and even if it's something great, I can be like, okay, I see how they got here. This, I can't. I can't imagine myself making a movie like this, because I wouldn't even begin trying. I wouldn't know where to begin. I would give up before I started. And so that's just amazing to me that this works. Like, it is so funny, it's so dumb, it's so brilliant, it's so unique, it's so fantastic, that even though this movie is definitely not going to be the average person's cup of tea, it still has a 7.7 on IMDb and an 82% on Metacritic. How does such a niche, weird thing like this happen? And like, it feels like if Fred the movie had that kind of reviews instead of a 4 or whatever it has, it just doesn't make sense that this movie is as popular as it is, because you look at the poster for a half a second and go, yeah, that looks dumb, and then you watch it and you go, nope, it's amazing. 10 out of 10, no notes. Like, I don't know what you did, but I loved it. Like, imagine you're all these other filmmakers spending $100 million on a movie. $200 million, who cares? And then these guys, for $150,000, upstaged all of you. Like, Terrifier 3, I thought was cheap. That was $250, I think, something like that. This is even cheaper. It's almost half as expensive. That's crazy. Some people are just really talented, man. Number 6, Challengers. Remember when this movie came out and everybody was, buzzing about Oscars for this movie, but it came out in April? Yeah, that's a shame. This movie should have come out much, much later, because the Oscar buzz was deserved. But, movies that come out in April don't typically win Oscars. I know Everything Everywhere All at Once did, but that's rare. That's not supposed to happen. You save the Oscar movies for the end of the year. And this movie, I don't know if it's going to get any Oscars at all, but it really deserves, like, it should win Best Score. I think it was the best score of the year. It should be a contender for Best Visual Effects because it's phenomenal. There's this whole scene where they're playing tennis back and forth, and you have the POV as the camera of the ball, and you're just spinning around. It looks brilliant. It looks fantastic. It looks seamless. And speaking of looking great, the cinematography is also maybe the best of the year. And then, you know what, throw in a Best Script nomination in there, Best Director, maybe Best Actress, I don't know. All around, this movie is just so European and so great, and I loved all of it. And it's so, well, not all of it, hold on, before you start talking about that locker room scene, shut up. It was such a wonderful experience. It's like, I compared it to, like, Whiplash in my first thoughts, which may seem a little bit weird, but it's like, it's another classic tale of... Your bike's not loud enough, dude. Make it louder. It's just a classic tale of obsession and what it does to people. And not only is that a really impactful story, it's also just told beautifully and brilliantly. And once again, if this isn't your cup of tea, I get that. I know these movies can kind of really frustrate people when, you know, you've got quote-unquote ambiguous endings and you know, unlikable characters and just mean-spirited storytelling. I get if you don't like that, but you can't watch this and tell me it's not good, you know? And the fun thing is, I do like it. I like characters like this. I like stories like this. Pushed all the right buttons and at the exact right time. It's absolutely brilliant. And like I said, it's a real shame that it was put out when it was put out, because it got the Oscar buzz and then kind of died out, and now I don't know that it's going to get nominated for anything, but it definitely should. It's easily one of the best movies of the year. Easily. And now we're into the top 5, so even if you skipped forward, you probably didn't skip this far, so we're going to get into the top 5 right now, starting off with number 5, Kinds of Kindness. So last year, when Poor Things came out, I was like, I don't know if I like this or not. I think I want to, but I'm kind of weirded out by some of it. I'm not sure if this is my thing, but like, I feel like this director, writer is great, and I want to see whatever he does next so I can truly make up my mind if this guy is good or not. Turns out he's great, because holy shit, I loved the style, once again, of this movie. And even though it's an anthology, and I don't love anthologies, proven once again in this one, because like, there's always the one story you don't like as much as the others, it always seems. And once again, that happened here, where I'm like, I really like 2 of the stories, and then one of them I wasn't really super high on. But still, regardless, the directing, Yorgos Lanthimos is one of the greatest minds we have right now in filmmaking. His eye, his tone, his way with just painting a picture, both visually and emotionally, is just, I don't know. It's good, man. And then you throw in, like, one of the most star-studded casts you can possibly do, with Willem Dafoe, Jesse Plemons, Emma Stone, Margaret Qualley. The movie's just brilliantly acted, brilliantly directed, with amazing visuals and just such unique takes and haunting storylines that really just stick with you and, like, unnerve you. It's not a horror movie, it's not a thriller, it's not any of those things, but it just, it like gets under your skin and like sticks through your rib cage and just pokes at you, and you can't put it down, you can't stop thinking about it, and it just festers there until like you're making videos on what does it all mean. You know, it's one of those movies where you're like, I need an ending explained video right now. Somebody tell me what's going on. And it's one of those movies that just, you're probably like 15 minutes in max going, I'm gonna love this. This is great. And like, you're scared watching, you're like, how are they gonna ruin it? Because this movie can't be this good the whole time, can it? And then it just somehow manages to be. And yeah, I know I was a little harsh on Poor Things. Still kind of a little bit weirded out by that movie, but ultimately this movie was fantastic, and now I know I need to go back and watch the rest of his catalog, because he's earned my respect. I know he cares so much about what I think. It's just, I don't know, great all around. Makes you feel things. Some things that you don't necessarily think you want to feel, but you feel them anyway, and it makes you think. And like I said, what is art if it doesn't make you feel or make you think? This does both. Number 4, A Real Pain. A Real Pain probably made me more annoyed and uncomfortable than any other movie came close to this year, and that was the exact intention, and it did it brilliantly. I mean, Jesse Eisenberg, both as an actor and a director, as well as Kieran Culkin, are just brilliant in this movie, and make it feel so painfully real that you forget it's a movie at times. And, like, literally, like, I mean, and I know that happens with good movies. It's like, oh, I felt like I was there. This movie, like, I remember at certain points watching it feeling like it was a documentary, you know, where it's like you see certain people and you're like, I forgot they were actors, not real people. Obviously, you know who Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg are. It's hard to forget who they are. But, like, so many of the other actors were people I'd never seen in anything before, and I just accepted them as whoever they were portraying. And you just felt like, oh, this is a social experiment of Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg walking around being annoying to people in real life. And it made you feel so awkward and so painful, you know. It felt like a real pain where, you know, I get secondhand embarrassment very easily, and I just get very awkward about stuff very easily. And this movie just made me want to disappear so many times in the best way. Like, it really captured some real genuine emotion and feeling in these characters and their story that just, it felt like nothing I'd felt before watching a movie. And that's where like I said, like, I want something that makes you feel and think, but I also want originality, and this definitely captured both in a way that very few movies do. And, you know, at the same time, I think some people may be like, oh, it's just a movie about people walking around talking, like, what? There's not a whole lot to it, but it's like there doesn't need to be any more than that, because what was there was so genuine, feeling like the subtlety and the artistic expression mixed with what genuinely felt like real life events with real, very real people and real characters that had me going, well, which one am I? I think I'm both. You know, I am off the deep end this way sometimes and off the deep end that way, and I feel like I relate to both of them so much, and it's so painful to see these characters exposed like this, because it feels like it's exposing you too. Such a powerful movie. It's also brilliantly funny at times, and very, you know, powerful in like an emotional, uplifting way, but it's also emotionally draining in how much it like tears you apart too. So I don't know, it hit every end of the spectrum for me, where short from being terrified, you know, like it did everything a movie can do. And it's all from, as far as I understand, the first time director Jesse Eisenberg, which was just phenomenal, you know, and I'm so glad that he decided to make it, and I'm so glad Kieran Culkin decided not to back out of the movie, because he tried to, if you didn't know that. And I just felt like this was a match made not in heaven, because heaven wouldn't put together such an awful pairing, such a painfully awkward pairing, but it was put together somewhere that knew what they were doing, because this movie needed to be made with these guys, and it just, brilliant, and I loved every second. Number 3, Dee Dee. Are you like me, and were 13 years old in 2008? Were you also a teenage boy who was into skateboarding and videography and trying to look cool when you weren't really? Did you also fight with your older sister about things that were stupid? Yeah, well, guess what? Aside from the character being Asian American, I related to pretty much every aspect of this movie. And it was so brilliantly done that it makes you kind of be confused that this was the debut feature by this writer-director. I just couldn't believe it. It didn't make any sense to me that, like, it felt like this guy had been making movies forever. But yeah, regardless, it seems a little bit early in my life for nostalgia-fueled autobiographical movies to start coming out. Like, we just had Steven Spielberg make the movie about himself, and we get mid-90s and stuff, but it's like, we're already making movies about 2008? Oh God. How old am I? You know? But no, it captured that time beautifully. Not just, the era of 2008, but the age of 13. And I know it's been done before. I don't want to say that this is a completely original movie. We make movies like this all the time, We had, like I mentioned, mid-90s. There was 8th grade. There's plenty of, other coming-of-age movies out there. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. All of these other movies. But to me, this just felt I don't know, it hit the closest to home for me. And obviously that's a subjective thing. Like, I mean, this guy was talking about himself. I just happen to be similar to him in a lot of ways. From the, skateboarding to the videography and all that stuff. Trying to make dumb YouTube videos and then trying to look cool. And then, having really awkward conversations with girls through instant messaging and Facebook and stuff. Just the way people talked and related to each other back then. And, the different way that, like, MySpace and Facebook was affecting our lives at the time. It's like all these things that were just, it's all a slice of life, a moment in time captured in these kind of movies. And once again, I'm not trying to say it's never been done before, but it's never hit me like this before, because it's never been about me before. So maybe there's some bias coming in here. But I to me, this was one of the absolute best versions of the coming-of-age story that I've seen. Even though I've seen a million, this was one of the absolute best. So I think even if you're not born in 95 and therefore 13 in 2008 or somewhere around that range, even if you're not, I think you'll still be able to really enjoy this movie and relate to aspects of it, because I think it's something that transcends time and era. I think it's something that is just everybody went through something like this, where you just make really dumb decisions, and it's dumb, but you're just trying to figure out what being cool is and how to make friends and how to not lose friends that you already had in the process, and you're trying to change who you are, but you don't know who you want to be yet. You don't even know who you were, so you're just constantly fighting yourself and everybody around you, which unfortunately happens to be your family and the people that love you most, and so you're just constantly evolving and struggling with the fact that you're evolving because you don't know what that means. Man, this movie's great. Number 2, The Substance. I really thought long and hard about making this number 1 because it is, to me, the movie I enjoyed the most this year, but that's where I say it comes down to subjectivity versus objectivity, and number 1, I just had to admit, was a better made movie, but The Substance is by no means a poorly made movie. It's one of the best made movies I've ever seen. I don't even know where to begin describing this movie to somebody who hasn't seen it, and luckily I think most people have at this point, but it is the most demented, awful, terrible movie that everybody should see. Because, yeah, and I think, obviously, this movie was written by a woman for women, and I think they'll be able to enjoy it the most and relate to it the most. But at the same time, I think it's so important for men to see this movie to, one, there'll be parts you can relate to, too, because there's certain aspects of it that are universal. The wanting to be young and beautiful, that's not just women. Men, you wouldn't see all the guys at the gym 24/7 if that wasn't true. But ultimately, you get to see the horrors that are being inflicted upon, the women in your life and the women around you. And so it's a very powerful feminist message, but it's also just a wonderfully, fantastically gross movie with amazing cinematography, a fantastic score. I know I've talked about several movies this year already, I don't even think I mentioned, but Dune, of course, had a great score. Hans Zimmer, but Challengers had a great score. The Substance, to me, is my favorite score of the year. I don't think it's gonna win, but it's just the way that, the sound design of that movie is just the second you heard that, horn, that digital horn or whatever, synthetic horn, you're just and I'm locked in, and you just knew, I very rarely see the same movie in theaters twice or more, because that very easily ruins a movie for me if I see a movie multiple times so close together, because then it kind of just, it feels like too much too soon, you're being love bombed by this movie. But this was one that I wasn't afraid to, and so I saw it twice, I think within a month of each other, and both times were such a fantastic experience because I love this movie and everything about it. The acting in it's phenomenal. I mentioned Margaret Qualley already earlier. She was in Kinds of Kindness, but this movie was the one that really won me over to her as an actor. Demi Moore also steals the show, and if horror wasn't absolutely spat on by the Oscars, she would be nominated for an Oscar. Maybe she still will be. We can cross our fingers and hope. And then also Dennis Quaid is phenomenal in this movie. The whole cast is really great, but like those three are phenomenal. The visual effects, you know, there's obviously going to be CGI in this movie, but you know, the practical effects are so much fun to look at. They're brilliant. I love them. I already mentioned the score, but I can't mention it enough. It sounds great. I love it. The sound design, just the visuals of this movie. There's just this small clip that I see all the time on Twitter where one character is dragging another character by the ankle down the hallway and they're sprinting. And it's just like, if the whole movie wasn't so beautiful, everybody would be talking about that scene like it's the best scene that they've seen this year. But because everything in the movie looks so great, that scene gets lost in the shuffle. But it's an absolutely brilliantly shot movie with homage after homage to amazing other visual masterpieces. And then just, I don't know, the way, like, the movie just grabs you by the balls from the first second, you know, and never lets go. It really just forces you into this awful world that you are now trapped in that is so brilliant. And it's like, I don't know if this makes sense, but it reminded me of the first time I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it's just like, how do you make a movie this brilliant? And how do you have a mind to contain this world that you thought up? The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, maybe I should have made it number one, but I'm sticking to my guns. I think number one is an objectively better movie, but to this, subjectively, I haven't had nearly as much fun as I did watching this movie as any other movie this year. That's not even close, really. The number one best movie of 2024, in my opinion, is Conclave, which, if you don't know, is directed by Edward Berger and starring Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and other great actors. And I just, you know, I mentioned during Sing Sing watching that, going like, okay, now here's an Oscar movie. But like, it still kind of felt like watching this movie where it's like, oh no, now here's an Oscar movie where it's like every shot, and I know every cinematographer, at least once you get to Hollywood levels of filmmaking, every cinematographer is setting up a shot for a reason. Like they think the shot's good or it means something to them, or there's a reason they put the camera where they did. But everything about Conclave felt intentional. It wasn't just put the camera here because where else would we put it? Or make the sound design like this because how else would it sound? Or, you know, have the line like this because it needs to be said. Every minute detail about this movie felt on purpose, by design, and flawless. It's so well made, like everything about it. And it's another one of those movies that's like, you could argue with somebody and be like, oh, how'd you find it entertaining? It's just people talking. I was so enraptured in everything that, once again, it's the kind of the thing from like A Real Pain where I'm like, oh wait, I'm not watching a documentary, this is real. And then it's also visually captivating, like I said about a bunch of other movies here. It also makes you feel things, it makes you think things. Like, I saw this movie with an audience full of Catholics, and we had a wide variety of reactions to the end of this movie because I think it was designed to make you think and feel things, and it was some thoughts and some feelings a lot of people weren't prepared to feel and think. And it was, to me, absolutely masterful. And this is, once again, one of those movies that it's like, this is an award movie. It's just got that feel to it. It's just got that style to it. It just smells like a gold statue, you know? And I don't know if it's going to win any Oscars or Golden Globes. I don't know that. But it should. Everything about this movie was brilliant. From its head to its toe, every shot, every sound snippet. I ranted about it in my first thoughts where I was like, the way you can hear his nose breathing. But like, that's like how much they paid attention to the sound design. And like, now I've talked about this a million times, but ever since I edited a movie's sound, I did sound mixing for a movie, like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, because half of Hollywood movies don't even have sound mixing. They just throw the sound together and go, yeah, good enough. And so when you hear sound design that's this flawless, and not only that, but this intentional, where it's like we were supposed to feel like we were in the head, like the personal space of the main character in this movie. And so when the camera pulls in and all you can hear is the sound of the air whistling through his nostrils, in and out and in and out, it just is by design. Like the Pope himself blessed this movie. I don't know. It's hard to give this movie enough praise from my perspective. And yeah, subjectively, you may, one, not like, political thrillers where people are just talking earnestly about stuff for 2 hours. Maybe that bores you. Or maybe you will get really offended by the ending of this movie. I'm sure a lot of people have. I get that. I do, if those are your opinions, but I don't care. Because I loved every second of this movie. But what did you think? Are you mad that Conclave was number one? Do you think it should have been The Substance or something else entirely? Nosferatu, Dune, maybe? Let me know in the comments below your favorite movies. And also, like I said at the beginning, Happy New Year. Thanks for watching. New videos coming soon. Big announcements and other things. Thanks. Bye. Man, I'm sorry I'm sick. This video, I drank 2 bottles of water. This was a rough go. But finally, it's done. Except for the editing. Golly. Miss Molly.